Hey everyone, it's Natalie Bencavanga, and I am back for another Facts Over Fear. It was a heated scene at the Pennsylvania State House on October 1st as lawmakers debated a controversial bill targeting so-called Glock switches, small illegal devices that can turn semi-automatic handguns into fully automatic weapons. The emotional back and forth came just before a narrow vote on the measure, which ultimately failed by just a single vote. House Bill 1866 was part of a broader push to strengthen the state's gun laws, coming on the heels of several high profile shootings, including 3 police officers in York County and the killing of conservative activist Charlie Kirk in Utah. And despite the intense discussion, the bill fell short, with one Democrat, Representative Frank Burns, breaking with his party to vote against it, joining unanimous Republican opposition. It wasn't a total loss for gun reform advocates, though. Another measure requiring background checks for long guns like rifles and shotguns did pass with bipartisan support earlier that week. However, things got tense during the debate over the bill to ban machine gun conversion devices. At one point, a shouting match erupted on the House floor after Representative Malcolm Kenyatta of Philadelphia delivered a fiery critique of gun rights advocates, specifically calling out the idea that the Second Amendment is meant to protect against government tyranny. So, joining us now to talk about what happened that night, the political divide, and where the conversation goes from here is Representative Malcolm Kenyatta. Thank you so much for joining me.
Natalie, always happy to talk to you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So let's just start with that moment on the House floor where things got pretty heated during the debate. What was going through your mind when this started, and really what caused it?
You know, there is an old saying that is completely appropriate for this question. A hit dog hollers.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a part of what we saw during my remarks, where a number of my Republican colleagues were, out of their chairs, were yelling, as you can hear on the video. And for people who don't, follow every intricate detail of House floors, we have really good microphones on the House floor. So often, even if there is conversation in the room, people listening can't hear it. So when you're able to actually hear the conversation from people who are not speaking at any given time, it gives you a sense of how loud and raucous, they were. And the point that I was making throughout my remarks was to question what seems to all of us, and what is very clear, hypocrisy from some of the supporters of this legislation. They talked about faith, they talked about the Constitution, they talked about needing to stand up to tyranny. And I went point by point to dispute, frankly, what they had been saying over what was 2 days of different bills that would make Pennsylvanians safer.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of my remarks, after the hollering and the hoopla, one of my colleagues, Representative Barger, actually, who he sits toward the aisle, but in the middle of a row. And I'm walking down the center aisle, okay? And so I'm coming here. He is coming out of his seat, literally pushing his way past other people who are sitting in his row to point at me, to yell at me, and then went on to say, boy, you better watch it. You better be careful. And so, I said after everything sort of calmed down, the sergeant at arms came in and, got him back to his seat, and we, got off the House floor. I am not going to be bullied. I am not going to be silenced, not by any of my colleagues, not by this president or administration, not by anyone. And in this moment where we hear so much about Republicans being the party of safety, they actively went out of their way to vote down bills that would have made Pennsylvanians more safe.
That felt like extremely racist language to me, as I'm sure it did to others who just heard you share that.
Let me be clear. This is not about me, and frankly, I don't care about his language toward me. What I care about is his votes. And the votes that he takes makes Pennsylvanians less safe. And I think it's important for people to understand sort of the context of this Glock switch conversation. This is a bill that was supported by Glock. by the gun manufacturers.
Wow.
This was a bill that was supported by every police union in the state of Pennsylvania, by the State Troopers Association, by the DA's Association. And so when you have a piece of legislation, and also, let me be also clear about this, by gun safety groups and folks who've been pushing for gun safety in our communities, this type of weaponry and machinery was something that our founders could have never conceived. And so, I hear people talk about, and to my colleagues, and these are one of the points that I made throughout this debate, they talked about our sort of inability to do anything on this issue because it would be in somehow, going against the Second Amendment. Our founders had no clue that you would be able to take a handgun and then bastardize it in such a way where you were able to, within a minute, shoot 900 bullets a minute. And the legislation was brought by my colleague, Mandy Steele, who represents a community where a police chief was brutally murdered because a criminal had access to this device and was able to kill a member of law enforcement who was incredibly well regarded by other folks in law enforcement, but also by his neighbors in his community, in a pretty small town. So this is, a prime example of, I think, some of the cognitive dissonance that is constantly on display from my colleagues, but also it's a prime example, Natalie, of the lie that Republicans are somehow the party of safety. I hear often about crime in Philadelphia and these cities, and then you have legislators like myself who are elected to represent our communities, who listen to our neighbors, who want us to do something on gun safety, who want us to do something about ghost guns. I actually had legislation as the prime co-sponsor with Morgan Cephas, a bill that also failed by one vote, sadly. And so it is just so frustrating to have people pretend to give a damn about crime, and then we advance legislation that would actually do something about crime. Republicans vote against it and then try to say they're the party of crime, they're the party of protecting law enforcement. And there are a lot of folks, in law enforcement who I think ought to pay attention, not to what these folks say when they show up to your union hall, but what they actually do when given an opportunity to vote to keep all of us safe, particularly our law enforcement. I mean, I'm just make this last point. These weapons and these switches are known to be the types of weapons that criminals want to have if they want to be in a confrontation with law enforcement. And you have states like Alabama, which has banned these weapons. Alabama. Wow. And we can't figure out how to do it here in Pennsylvania. It's wrong.
And I wanted to bring up a point of what you said too around, this sort of do as I say, not as I do, right? This energy of our words are leading, but our actions are not matching, because they talk a lot about legislating against violence, right? But when it comes down to it, what I have read is that a lot of the Republican legislators say, well, the bad guys will just get the guns anyway. They'll just get these things anyway. So trying to pass more laws just harms the good guys with a gun. But that narrative, that train of thought, that philosophy never seems to extend past this particular issue, right? Because we see the attempts to legislate sexuality, identity, all of these other things. And yet, why is it with the guns, Representative Kenyatta? What is it about the guns that makes people say, no, I'm not giving into this particular issue?
What it is bullshit. I respect the Second Amendment. There are people who I love, who are very close to me, who are law-abiding gun owners. But if we actually take their logic, if you want to even call it that, if you want to take their logic and take it to its clear and inevitable conclusion, then we should pass no laws on anything. We should just shut down the government, as Republicans have in Pennsylvania and in the U.S. Capitol, and effectively do nothing. But your point is so well taken and so important to underscore, because as I said in my remarks, I also referenced what you just said in my speech. I said, we pass new crimes in this building like some people change their socks. So this idea that my colleagues are against passing new laws because nobody's going to follow the law, that stands in stark contrast to what they do on every other issue. And it is one of these things that not only are they wrong on the facts, but they're also wrong on where public opinion is. All of the bills that we brought up about gun safety are about that, gun safety, not about getting rid of all guns, not about a rejection of the cultural significance and the hobbyists and others who use guns for those purposes. I am not against guns existing. What I am against is us making it as easy as possible for bad actors and also for folks who intend on doing Americans harm to have easy access to these weapons. I mean, you have folks who don't even want to close what we, casually call the terrorist loophole, because people are able to come to our country and get easy access to guns. And it's not just Malcolm's opinion. We look at folks who have been convicted of terroristic acts, and you've had the Department of Justice in cases highlight their conversations with one another, where they say, don't worry about trying to get a gun into the country. You can just go and easily buy one at a gun show or wherever else. And so we have people who want to do Americans harm, who are communicating how easy it is to get those weapons. And you have criminals who want to come into our communities and put our neighbors in positions that too many of my colleagues who vote against this legislation have no understanding of. They don't know what it is like to sit with families whose entire world has been shattered because somebody had easy access to a gun that they had no business getting their hands on, and they refuse to look at the mountain of evidence, to look at the bipartisan support, to look at the desires of law-abiding gun owners who they pretend to protect. And in this particular instance, to even listen to the gun manufacturers themselves, who are saying this is a reasonable restriction that would make our communities and ultimately their product safer.
It's interesting to me listening to all of that, because it just sounds, like you said, so logical. And this bill did just fail by one vote. So two things. Do you think that there's a chance that you'll try again, that everybody will try to run this again, or was that? And the second thing I wanted to ask you was Representative Frank Burns was the lone Democrat to vote against this bill. Have you spoken to him, or do you have any understanding as to what made him vote on this with the Republicans?
So let me say this. This work is never going to end, because we have a responsibility. We have a moral responsibility. We have an economic imperative, frankly, to make all of our communities safe. And this is central to why I'm a Democrat and central to why I'm a legislator. Because I have this crazy idea, Natalie, that people ought to be able to live in communities and not get shot in their classrooms, get shot while they're walking down the street, get shot going to a concert, get shot praying while in church, get shot leaving school, get shot at a traffic light because somebody's having a bad day, get shot in any of these instances. And it is unfortunate that I could spend the rest of this conversation with you listing the innumerous amount of instances of folks easily getting access to weapons of war. These are not for hunting or for show. These are weapons of war, weapons that are used in combat. And we're in a position where we recognize this continues to be one of those issues that we have to work with Democrats and Republicans to make the argument. And we're going to continue to do that, with all of my colleagues. We're going to continue to do that, with my Republican colleagues as well. This is one of those moments where it's clear to me we have to continue to expand our majority with people who actually believe in gun safety. And I particularly get frustrated at some of my colleagues from the Pittsburgh and Philadelphia suburbs who run pretending to be moderate on these issues. And then they get up here to Harrisburg, where I am, by the way, for viewers. They get up here and they vote the same way that all of my colleagues who are part of the Freedom Caucus and everything else, they all vote the exact same way. And yet these folks go home and say, oh, we're moderate. I don't know what is moderate about being okay with having these types of weapons on our streets. And frankly, when we talk about building our majority, and when we talk about putting ourselves in a position where, we don't just have a one-seat majority, but we have a multi-seat majority, a part of that is going to require us to flip seats in communities where the overwhelming amount of people within those communities support gun safety. It's why the colleagues I reference pay lip service to it during the campaign, because they know a majority of their constituents want them to do the right thing, but they are so locked in to what their party leadership demands of them that they refuse to do the right thing, even when it could lead to the types of safer communities that I hear people claim to want, but aren't willing to do any of the things that we need to do to create safe communities. And gun safety is a piece of it. But you know what? Also investing in communities where people have healthcare and good jobs and community centers. These are the things that we know bring down crime. And I often make the point, this is not Malcolm's opinion. There's a great body of research on this very topic of how we create safe communities. And it is important for people who sometimes vote for Republicans because they think Republicans care about safety to understand that in many respects, Republican policies are the very barrier to us having the type of safety that we need in our community.
Representative Kenyatta, I really appreciate you taking time. I know you are very busy. In fact, you were just coming out of the House when we were doing this interview. So thank you for doing this. I just want to wrap up with one more question. Yeah. So I always say Pennsylvania is like a petri dish. If it's happening here, it is happening everywhere. And we are seeing gridlock everywhere, both at the state level and the national level. We are seeing the rhetoric and the hate violence and the speech around that all being turned up, right? And like you were just talking about, I think we share the dream of having safe communities, prosperous communities, communities that are properly resourced, right? And properly supported. How do we get to a place, and I know this is a big question, but how do we get to a place where we get more people on board with those ideas when there's so much disinformation, even in the face of sharing facts?
I think about, the last election. I think about just many local elections. In almost every instance, what you see is a majority of the voting population didn't vote. Yeah. And so I think right now, our work is not to just talk to the people who show up every election, and we must, okay? We need to be very clear that no elected official, no political party is owed a vote. You have to earn votes, and you have to go back to people who've supported you in the past and, renew not only your commitment, but to lay out to people what you will do if they give you the great honor. And it is an incredible honor to be able to serve in this way. That being said, there are so many people who don't engage in the political process because they look and they say, Democrat, Republican, Independent, nobody is in it for me. So we have to do consistent work to make clear to people that we are in this for 3 words: make life better. I think that is the job of every person in government. And ultimately, I think that is the message of the Democratic Party. to communicate day in and day out, even in between campaigns, what is our vision to make life better for people? And then when given that great responsibility, given that great trust, to go out and make it happen. And I think in a very interesting way, Donald Trump's destruction of the rule of law, destruction of cultural and political norms, destruction of the values that make America America. A part of what it shows, though, Natalie, is that we can't have transformational change in America. Right now, we're
I love that
experiencing
optimism.
transformational change. I mean, listen,
Look,
right now we're
look.
experiencing it in a really negative way. But what it proves is that when given the opportunity to serve, we better move with a level of urgency and with a level of commitment to make life better for people who have given up on the political process. Because I would just say this, and I've said it often, Donald Trump is a clear and present threat to our democratic institutions and to the rule of law because he does not care about it. He threatens judges. He ignores the laws that he doesn't like. He does a whole host of things. That's a very real threat. But there is an insidious and ongoing threat to our democracy that is really outlined by the people who have given up. When you have a democracy where most of the people say, I don't believe in it anymore, that is a threat because democracy is an idea. It is an idea. And when people give up on that idea because they don't see it actually making their lives better, that makes us very vulnerable to the types of charlatans and snake oil salesmen that promise quick and easy, even if they don't often promise solutions, but they promise to at least get those people who are making your life worse when in fact they are the ones making your life worse every single day. So we have a lot of work to do to rebuild trust. And I come at this, as you well know, becoming vice chair of the Democratic Party just 8 months ago, not because I was frustration free, but because I was frustrated. And I say that to people, you don't have to vote or get engaged in politics when you're frustration free, only if you think everything's going great. Actually, your anger is information for you to tell you to get more involved. And when I did, as I did recently, I did a 105-mile walk from Philly to Harrisburg to talk about Pennsylvania's government shutdown. I know we've been talking about the national government shutdown, but you mentioned that Pennsylvania is a petri dish. We are OG to the government shutdown. Okay, our government hasn't been funded since July, and we're seeing the real impacts of that on transit. We're seeing the impacts of that just in right now. And the largest rape crisis center in Pennsylvania just had to lay off staff and close services. Our school districts are having to take out loans that they're going to have to pay exorbitant interest on, leading taxpayers to have to pay more in school property taxes. The list goes on and on and on. And when I did that walk, a part of what I said constantly was, we don't have to hate each other because some damn politician told us to. The majority of Pennsylvanians want safe communities. They believe, like I believe, that you should be able to work one good family sustaining job backed up by a union, not 2 and 3 and 4 jobs. They believe, like I believe, that you should be able to retire with dignity and decency. But we have to get more people who believe that engaged in the system at every single level, as voters, as candidates, as campaign workers, as volunteers, or just as educated citizens. Because when we are not paying attention, that is when bad things happen in government. I say this all the time, and I'll end here. Politicians need supervision. Okay? They need supervision. They need to know that you are paying attention to what the hell they are doing in your name. In your name. We have to make sure we're paying attention. And I refuse in this moment to be silenced, to be cowed. And I don't care how many, racist names I'm called. I don't care how many people point their fingers at me and tell me to shut up. I am not going to shut up when it comes to making life better for my neighbors and for people all across Pennsylvania.
Representative Malcolm Kenyatta, thank you so much for always speaking truth to power. I appreciate
Absolutely.
you. And I just want to say, I love this as a tagline, making life better. I feel like we can really run with this. It's It's clear.
Make life better. That's it.
That's what we're trying to do. No, I really appreciate everything that you shared. And if people want to learn more about what is going on at the state level or get in touch with you, how can they do that?
At Malcolm Kenyatta on every platform. And if there's a platform where somebody already has the username Malcolm Kenyatta, you tell them to give it to me. But I think I have them all. I think like the Pokemon, I've captured them all. Okay?
Oh, thank you so much again. And to everyone who tuned in, this is Facts Over Fear. And that's exactly what we're trying to do here is talk about the facts so we can reduce the fear. And until next time, as always, everyone, please take care of yourselves and each other.